Silence. I'm not really the sort of person that you would associate with silence and stillness, and some of you might identify with that. My friends and my family would certainly say that Julia lives her life with energy and enthusiasm and vitality. And yet, although that is true, there are also times in my life when I have been visited by silence and stillness. And I want to share with you one of those times and invite you to share in that time with me. Back in 1998, I was a secondary school teacher. I had 3 children, I had a husband, I had a busy life, I had a lovely life. And one February sunny day, walking in the Malvern Hills, my body stopped working properly. And by the time we got down to the bottom of the hill, my legs wouldn't work at all and I couldn't walk. And after that time, I spent several weeks in hospital, and I was eventually sent home with a diagnosis of severe ME and a wheelchair. So then followed a period of 9 years when I had to be very still. I spent a lot of my time resting and reflecting and meditating. And in fact, it was a 9-year spiritual journey, and I can say that in retrospect, looking back. And I sometimes felt, unlike some of the people we have with us here, Philip, Fionn, that I felt a little bit like a monk or a nun, but not one who had chosen their vocation, rather somebody who had had that vocation thrust upon them. But the time I particularly want to share with you is at the end of those 9 years. And inexplicably, my health deteriorated and spiraled downwards to the point where I was bedridden, I couldn't move unaided, I couldn't feed myself, and I couldn't eat normal food. And when that happens to you, you lose the ability to create meaning in your life in the ways that are normal and familiar to you. And I desperately needed to find a way to create meaning in my life at that point. And the last thing that I remember reading before I was unable to read was an article in a self-help newsletter written by my consultant. And in it, my consultant was a deeply spiritual human being who I had huge respect for. In this article, he claimed that if you switched off your mind and your body 4 times a day for 30 minutes, it would definitely make a difference. And because I trusted him, his words, that's what I did. And rather beautifully, it turned out that he hadn't written that at all, and I'd sort of dreamed up what I needed to hear. So I started, I was lying down anyway, switching off. I thought of it as my brain, that's metaphorical, because clearly my brain was still functioning. But I switched off my mind for periods in the day. And I noticed that it felt better to be in that space than it did to be out of it. So I began to extend the amount of time that I was spending in silence. So imagine no thought, no movement, silence, nothingness, absence, hours, hours, and hours. And after days and weeks, I noticed that my body began to stabilize, and that was interesting. And I kept going. Switch off, into silence, absence. And after more days and more weeks, a curious thing began to happen, because the absence then started to become a presence. So my nothingness turned into peace and calm and love. So silence, absence, presence, hours and days and weeks. And inside there is calm and there is love. And outside of my bedroom, there is crisis meetings with consultants and GPs and social services and all the rest of it. But in here, it is becoming calm. And then another curious thing. I start to disappear into the silence. So the I, the me of my story, my history, my neurology, my physiology, my habits, my beliefs, my attitudes, begins to disappear. And the boundary between me and the silence and the absence and the presence becomes blurred. And hours and silence and days and weeks. And then it dawns on me, if I have disappeared, if I have ceased to exist, then is it possible that a new me could be created? And at this time, my husband discovers that there are some people who have got better from this illness, and they've done a course, it's an NLP-based course, and they've got better. So that's seeding in my mind. This new me takes on this belief that it is now possible to get better. And more silence, and more nothing, and more something. And so my husband signs me up for the course, which is in several months' time. But I begin to dream myself into a new creation. And so I'm dreaming and I'm silent and I'm creating in some strange way who I am going to be in this new life. And 3 months is an awful long time when you're ready to be born now. So I start experimenting. I'm in the silence, I'm creating this new sense of who I am, how I function, what I believe, how I move, but I'm still on a bed. And on actually St. Valentine's Day, 2007, to my husband's consternation, I got up from my bed, walked to our living room, and we had afternoon tea together. And it was a rather surreal moment. And I went back to bed and I went back into silence and more silence. And the next day I did something similar. And the next day and the next day. And I did do the course, but by then I was walking around the village, I was walking around the beach, I was walking to the post box, and the new life was already beginning. So I did the course in April. I took myself off to the south of France in June to discover who I was as a well person. In September, I went back to school after 9 years and I began teaching 2 days a week. I also started training in NLP. In November, I saw my lovely consultant and he wrote to my GP and he said, this lady has had an almost miraculous recovery. And she in turn talked about me as a walking miracle. So the miracle word was used. But actually, what had happened, there had been silence for hours and days and weeks and months, and then healing, and then the miracle of new life, new birth.